thought about it a lot, and on this particular day, I thought I would share it with you. I think I'm going to talk about this episode called The Newsbenders. It came out in 1968, and this man here is waiting for somewhat of an interview. He's not really happy about it. It seems he might be a part of this company, but they want to recruit him to a higher level. This is just a conversation between two people, similar to the movie My Dinner with Andre. So he offers him a cigar, and he's still puzzled as to why he's here. He used to work for the BBC, and he's very uninterested, and quickly this man begins telling him about himself, perhaps to prove that he means business, that he knows everything about him. At first, it doesn't really impress the man. Small things like he owns a cottage, dog and a cat, what he's done over the years, and then it starts to get a little more intense. He tells him about his wife, his children, and his girlfriend, his affair. Now he's very shocked and also becomes very angry. At this point, he thinks he's being blackmailed. He tells him that they've been interested in him for a long time, and from all the information that they have, it's clear to him that they know everything. But he's still a little apprehensive, so he shows him a little chip and says he has one of these little chips implanted in him. When he went into the hospital for an appendix surgery, this transmitter was put into him. It monitors the pulse rate, and anything that he gets excited about will trigger this, and essentially record every word that he says. He says, for example, on July 26th, you were talking to this girl, Sheila, his affair, and he tells him exactly what he uttered to her. And now he has his attention. The boss man goes further and begins playing an audio recording of his very words from years ago. And now it's unmistakable to this character. Undeniable. He knows it's true. He's heard his own voice. So now he's asking about him. Who are you, then? And the guy pretty much tells him that he works for a larger organization. There's a vacancy in their news department, and they'd like to write or plan the news for 1973. So this would be several years later. So this is what he has been proposed. Still not wanting to accept, the man takes him on a tour to show him the back room, to show him essentially that he's not kidding, that the news is a creation and it's made in this building. So they've only roughed out the news for 1973, but these are the kind of things that they're working on. He tells him. He shows him a spaceship, something that is said to land on the moon, and he's showing him the footage, the fake footage that they filmed with this cheap little gadget. We can see the fake lunar landing or surface. Now he shows him something else. He says, this is something we're really proud of. 1973, it will be released. Codename Icarus. This satellite is equipped with weaponry to stop missiles. It can freeze air solid, stopping all missiles, killing all forms of life. Icarus orbits at the same speed as the Earth, can hang in position over every major city that threatens the peace-loving nations. I mean, this predates a lot of the things we've come to understand now. And here in 1968, they're talking about creating fake news for the people. And we can see the fake Earth in the background, and here again we can see craters of the moon or Mars. Now he shows him a television broadcast for September 5th, 1973. A new phase in warfare. And here is a fake war, and really interesting. It looks like a melted building. And they're saying that 2 5-megaton H-bombs have cooked this area. That will be the fictitious news in 1973, in the future. The guy asks him, you're gonna make this happen? And he says, no, we're going to make models. It's much cheaper to photograph models. For the past 10 years, the people have been listening to our fake news and listening to our fake commentaries. Again, this is a film from 1968. They accept it for the truth. Now this man is coming to terms, realizing that nobody's actually seen a missile. Nobody's actually been to space. Of course, course, they can be told whatever through the television or even print media. He says it's one thing to fake space, but people might figure things out with this artificial war. People will know. People could check up. And the man says there'll be no survivors in 1973. No rescue work. He says we usually plan the details in the final year. Now he asks him, what has bothered you the most in the past year? He says the American Continental Ballistic Missile, the Boy Wonder. And here he reveals the Boy Wonder to him. And the man's only seen the pictures. It's only been shown as a giant projectile. And here it's just mini. And he's actually a little apprehensive, actually a little scared of it. Again, it was the thing he was most worried about in the world. Now discovering it's just a little toy model. He says it's a scientific impossibility, but nonetheless it was sold to the people. He asks them what they're doing at Cape Kennedy when they're shooting off missiles and things to be launched into space. And he tells him we're just having a fireworks party almost every other day. He tells him, did you really think that there were things whizzing about up there? Sputnik, rockets, astronauts, crossing their legs for 8 days. He says it's been going on since Hiroshima. He says, what's your first reaction? And he says, relief. And he says, it has to be relief. So he says that was the photographic department taking the phony newsreel pictures of our models and processing film. Now he shows him a front cover of a magazine showing this toy rocket that he's just had a look at. And he says, I've only shown you the hard news. There are other things much softer, things we thought might interest you. He talks about a teenage movement that they're planning. Now he asks him, why? Why do all this? He says, you remember in 1945, the Americans let off 2 atomic bombs. Well, they didn't want other people doing the same thing. So they began creating a story that there was something much bigger in the works, the H-bomb. But it didn't work. He says, don't the other countries have these? He says they're all working together, all part of this show. And I think this is something that we have discovered. It wasn't shocking to me, but it was shocking to see a film in 1968 really revealing what would become so obvious in our time. He talks about how this is how they have ultimately created peace. He said, this avoids all conflicts. There is no danger of anybody wiping anybody out. But the illusion of it will be propagated. And this is the sinister part, even today. He talks about how people think they have a choice, capitalism or communism, strawberry or vanilla, and in the end it's all the same thing, giving people the illusion that they have a choice. He talks about how all the presidents are being controlled and all politicians. He says we control all the events, we build them up, and then we shut them down. At the top there's the economists, the top civil servants, top brass in the military, men who are above and beyond. He says 99.38% of the population wouldn't believe this conversation, and the rest are working for us. The rest are proud because they know they're guaranteeing the lives of their grandchildren, essentially by creating this false reality, this Truman Show for the masses. And this man is very upset. He says, you've achieved peace by scaring the hell out of the grandchildren and essentially all the people. And he's upset. He talks about the full bellies and the empty bellies. We've devised 2 ways to keep the empty bellies under control. One of them is this fictitious hydrogen bomb, and the other is money. Again, let me remind you, 1968. He says certain animals run when they're scared. Some bury their heads in the sand. You scare a hedgehog and it rolls itself up into a bowl. He says when a woman is frightened, she goes out and buys herself a hat. He says we threaten humans emotionally. He says people don't work for money, they work for the idea of money. They don't even love, they love for the idea of love. And he shows him the idea that has been sold on love, the idea that they've even created, how love should be. He tells him they created LSD. And here it's wrapping up. He says, you're not really going to ask me to work for you, are you? I mean, he's totally disgusted. And essentially he tells him, about the supercomputer, about the AI back then in 1968, and he said the top floor of this building is a supercomputer. Everything going through this computer, predicting and making decisions. And this man is very upset. He says, "You're basically controlled by a computer." And the man says, "No, it's just extra hands for the people who know how to control it." And in short, he tells him he's leaving. And the man replies that that little implant that they put in him, in which he knows is real now, because they have audio recordings of his life filed and archived, and he's heard them. He's heard his own voice. And he says that little implant has another purpose. He puts on some rubber gloves, pulls out one of the implants, and says there's enough in that implant to kill 6 people. It's like an explosive. He asked him at one point if he had one of these. He said yes, of course. And essentially, he realizes he has no choice. This whole meeting had a desired outcome that would take place whether he liked it or not. And essentially it ends by the man telling him, "You start on Monday." Again, this comes out in 1968, and this idea is that this group is creating all the news, and that nothing is really going on. Most people are not seeing the news with their eyes. They're only getting it from a few sources. Very revealing. I encourage you to watch this. I really just skimmed over everything, but that's the gist. And I would propose that things are much worse